to really dive in to DeepSeek.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to the show, Jorge. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for the invite.
I think you're covering the mics. Jorge, it's a little hard to hear you.
Oh, I see. Hey, can you hear me
That's
now?
better. That's perfect.
Perfect. Hey, thanks for the invite. My name is Jorge, and I'm a fourth year landscape architecture with the focus on urban and regional planning, studying at DALL-E. Thanks for the invite, guys.
Oh, great. Well, welcome to the show. Yeah, lots of news, Sam. Like DeepSeek just came out of nowhere, soaring across the ocean to attack from China. Wow. Only $6 million apparently. They've trained their model. This is crazy.
Well, at the expense of being maybe a little dramatic, yeah, I mean, it did kind of seem to catch people by surprise. There, so kind of rewinding, DeepSeek was, essentially a Chinese AI startup born out of a hedge fund. And they've had some success in the past, but nothing like this. This has kind of been their first kind of widespread news coverage with R1, which is kind of their latest model. But they've been around for about a year now, and they're owned by the High Flyer hedge fund, which is based out of China. So it's a subsidiary of High Flyer, which in of itself has only been around 8 years as a hedge fund. So, they've been around for not even 2 years at this point, May 2023, and they're essentially, I mean, again, like this has kind of been their first high profile release, which is kind of setting it apart, from the previous. I mean, they've had DeepSeek V2 and several other models that have come out last year, but this is essentially the first really performant, but also from a cost perspective, very it's very scary for at least AI companies in the US who have raised billions of dollars to, again, allegedly do something that has costed them a significantly less amount of money.
Well, billions. Yeah, in the billions, which is insane because for the speed of which this new company, DeepSeek, has achieved it, it's in record time. So it begs the question, like, it's all kind of a facade potentially.
Well, and that's a good point, is we don't really know what to believe too. I mean, obviously this is obviously the performance is very impressive. The efficiency improvements are very impressive. However, I don't know how much cost, sort of cost confidence we have necessarily. Whereas for training, it may have been a very low cost, but what about the cost to get it to the training stage? I mean, there still are a few unknowns. I think everybody's kind of focused in on the headline of, essentially it only cost X, basically $6 million or so to train, which is a very small amount, but also, I mean, we're basically citing, one scientific paper, basically, the DeepSeek technical report for this figure. So it is kind of, I mean, it is somewhat a proprietary piece of information in that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, this is crazy. Jorge, yeah, what thoughts do you have about DeepSeek? Have you used it yet? Have you given it a shot?
No, I haven't actually. I wanted to clarify. I'm not an expert on tech, but I have really good questions for people out there that doesn't know much about like this um, AI platforms or resources, right? I know there was a drop on Nvidia's stock market. It was almost 18%. But other than that, I wanted to ask you guys, what would be the main I would say difference between the American um, AI platforms that this one that we have here just launched.
So just some of the key differences with ChatGPT and Claude's these
On,
types of models, Gemini compared to DeepSeek.
I mean, Jorge brought up a great point in terms of the market
Yeah.
value wipeout from Nvidia. We do kind of have to talk about this. I mean, this kind of unleashed a fear factor into the market, right? We had the largest single day market cap loss of any company in US history yesterday, which is quite, I mean, quite a big deal. And I'll preface that with so far, right? Everything is sort of,
Mhm.
you know, uh, records are meant to be broken, right? Um, but that is something to mention, just kind of how seismic of a shift this has been. And I don't know, again, this could be a sentiment that's been building. I mean, the market is very fickle. um I really do like the stock market because it kind of embodies the fear and the greed of essentially a collective hive mind. So it's hard to say that this was all attributed to this in some ways, but also something to point out. And I mean, yeah, and really kind of what makes this starkly different is sort of this possibly the main difference between DeepSeek and other models is what they are calling a mixture of experts model. So what does this mean, right? So we have a very large model with a fairly sizable parameter store, right? We have 671 billion, which kind of outweighs really a lot of the other kinds of models. So from an absolute size perspective, it's a large model, but there's sort of an architecture within that model to activate a specific subsection of the parameters depending on the query. So let's say you ask it a math problem, right? So we're going to activate more or less 37 billion, or approximately 5% of that model to generate your response. And what that does is it essentially the efficiency gain is huge, right? You're really only activating and using um, a subsection of the model to accomplish um, the same, more or less the same quality of result in that way. So I think that's kind of the main, kind of the key difference and key efficiency breakthrough, as opposed to previous models where you may have all the parameters loaded and active for answering when you may not need all of them, essentially.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, of
also, I mean,
course.
I
Thank you
think
for your
one of the
answer.
big reasons. Yeah, this is, I think, well, we can't ignore the price of the input and output tokens being like 20 times cheaper for DeepSeek V3 compared to O1. And I mean, it's insane how reasonably priced. I mean, and what can that achieve, right? Like, so many more companies can now afford to build and train their own systems built on top of these models, right? And I think it can slash costs. I mean, in a time where we talk about inflation all the time, in an economy that, is in the state that it's in, I mean, I think this is kind of a breath of fresh air, and but I do think that it challenges the dominance of the American AI companies, and I feel bad. I mean, OpenAI, their business is around building models. They don't have, like Amazon, or Meta, they don't have platforms, and Google has a search engine to fall back on if Gemini doesn't work out, right? It's like it's crazy because I think we've been the notion up until this point has been drop as much money as you can in powerful, compute chips. That way you have an edge, where actually part of the problem here is that China was, I guess you could say, stifled by that aspect a little bit, but they didn't use it, wasn't a drawback for them, right? They powered through and they said, "Hey, we're going to make a more efficient model, and we're going to use this shortcut, and we're going to train it this way, and we're going to build these new systems that can achieve pretty much equal or better results most of the time, and for a fraction of the cost and in a fraction of the time." And so I think it really just goes to show that we've been talking about OpenAI so much as the front runner, and even Claude or Anthropic, they've been doing great things. But I think until this point, I think, yeah, they haven't really had a true challenge. And I think we've only seen that now with DeepSeek and the potential that this has, yeah, for disruption. And also, I don't think they saw it coming. I don't think these other tech companies, like, I don't think they really saw it coming. And yeah, it's and also it's worth noting the strategy. I think this is worth talking about. I don't know, Sam, what you guys think about their business models, but open source, of course, Meta and Llama, their model's been open source, but everything else is not. And I think it's really telling that I mean, keep in mind, I don't think the markets would not have had the impact that it did if DeepSeek was closed, right? But because it's open source and it's just out there, that's what really made the impact, right? Because now developers and people can download the code and everything's out there for people, right? So just it's very interesting.
No, yes, absolutely. Something to also see here for I use ChatGPT on daily tasks, and I pay a monthly subscription, and that's $20 to use all capabilities, or all the things you can do with ChatGPT, right? And this new model is on my understanding is free to use all those options out there. So for someone that is using AI for daily task and daily research, $20 can affect my budget on a monthly basis. That's something also really important to consider.
Well, yeah, now you get a better model theoretically, right? I mean,
For
because it
free.
does. It looks like on most tasks, it looks like it's performing better, and it's free. So yeah, like maybe are you considering canceling your ChatGPT Plus subscription?
I am actually. That's something that I was because I know like nowadays everything is charging a subscription, right? Monthly basis, $1, 2, 6, 5, but $20 a month. It's a lot for a subscription. I don't think I have any other subscriptions that are as expensive as ChatGPT is. And I pay it because I find it pretty reliable and I use it on my daily tasks, but uh, for people out there having a better service with more options that is more efficient for free, it's a game changer, right?
Yeah. No, and you're not the only one. I'm sure a lot of people are considering this. And actually, yeah, speaking of subscriptions, I was just looking at, I don't know how I did this today, but Gemini gave me, the free trial for buying, the phone, and they're charging $20 a month when my trial's over. And I can tell you, I just put a reminder in to make sure that I cancel that because I don't value Gemini at all, especially with tools like DeepSeek. And I already have access to other things that I use and value more. And I think that it is very telling that the American companies are uh, basically providing less value and charging for it, where this model is open source, came out of nowhere, and is better and free. And I think it's a wake up call for people. And OpenAI is going to feel this, not only in the stock price. I bet you they have had a surge of cancellations this week. I bet you they'll continue to as more people find out about it. And and it's not like is everybody just going to switch to DeepSeek? I mean, but I think it makes people reimagine, wait, I can get this. And we talk about a lot services that aggregate different tools together. Kagi is a good example of that ad-free search engine that has all the AI tools built into one. I think it's, worth mentioning, things like Merlin is a very popular app that has given free O1 access. And they also have premium options, but instead of paying $20 a month to ChatGPT and another 20 if you want to have Claude, you basically pay $20 a month and you get access to all the premium closed models, closed source models. And so I think maybe this is also a wake up call. Do I need to be paying for AI? Could I use an open source model? Llama's really good, right? Their new models have gotten bigger. And of course, DeepSeek is, their new reasoning model. I mean, just the performance is going above and beyond. And I think it's worth noting as well with O1, the reasoning into this is these models can start doing tasks that they are not trained on. Like, I think we're closer, to artificial general intelligence potentially than most people realize, because when reasoning models get a task they've never seen, they start to learn how to do it based on, I mean, again, they're forming new pathways to achieve things. And so I think that's what's really powerful to see how, reasoning models, can perform in those tasks. Sam, what do you think about that?
Well, you bring up a great point with, at least the subscriptions, just because I mean, I know I've been on Twitter recently and, seen several people just kind of echoing your sentiments, especially with, ChatGPT, a big part of even the pro subscription is that you're limited to the number of O1 responses that you can generate. So this is, I think for having, essentially an unlimited, an unlimited output plan for free. I mean, regardless of how that's being subsidized, that's going to be a very appealing, solution for a lot of people. And I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, Google does have some competitive options, when it comes to Gemini Flash, um, and otherwise. But I think, it's kind of hard because without kind of the media attention that's been kind of shown onto DeepSeek, we're very much in an attention economy. And as far as like, the performance metrics, I mean, the thing is, it's just sort of like, again, like nobody really has the time to, read the paper and learn about auxiliary loss free load balancing, or low rank key value joint compression. Like, I mean, at a very distilled level, like nobody particularly cares. It's the same performance and it's free. That's just sort of like the two things that I think make it easily repeatable, but also kind of that killer, and these are huge, apparently, parallel technological breakthroughs to what OpenAI. This has kind of been hinted by Sam Altman and a few of their product engineers on X, at least. Congratulations for the release. We had some of the same. It reads very. It's a very curious way to put it. It's just we're like, oh, we discovered the same thing, and it's like, well, great. It's not like, where's your paper on it? And kind of having it be open source, I think, really is the checkmate of, well, here's how they did it, and it's in a paper. And no one particularly knows or cares where it came from. It's just the fact that they're sharing it has also kind of contributed to that backlash of like, well, we have these, billion-dollar companies that essentially are gatekeeping this, potentially societal shifting technology. There is a little bit of social backlash behind that too, of like, well, they kind of beat them to the punch in, well, it's like, it's great that you have the same idea, but why didn't you share it? I mean, it's just sort of like, it's kind of like gold star for knowing about it, but now everybody knows about it, so you're not going to need the credit, which is kind of another interesting kind of open source phenomena behind it. But there are a lot of cutting edge. I mean, just it's really cool to think about, much like your brain, we only activate certain subsections of it while doing different things. Or, they got it to run on older hardware because they optimized, essentially the communication of the low level code. I mean, so it's really quite clever, how they got it to work. I mean, they're going to get around these restrictions, so they won't be held up by chip capacity or not having. So kind of that old paradigm of, we need to throw all of this hardware at it is kind of, and part of the Nvidia shock as well. If you optimize something that doesn't need to, potentially utilize as many GPUs, you won't buy as many GPUs. I mean, if you optimize your code, it reduces your hardware requirements. So whether this will be a long-term blow to Nvidia, maybe not. It's impossible to say. I'm not a stock market whisperer. But they are in a very sitting pretty position. I mean, they're selling very high margin product with no real competition. And I think, at least from a software perspective, there's a huge incentive to further optimize what you run on it, just so you don't have to give Nvidia another $40,000 to run your model.
Well, and as we've seen, I mean, you might not even need that power. I mean, if the models could just be more efficient, as we've seen now with DeepSeek, right? Like, companies are probably scrambling to rethink how they can adapt to this new efficiency era, I guess you could say, in AI, right?
Well, and that's kind of the genius of it too, is that for more or less, I mean, I saw this fascinating blog post. Essentially, you can run the full 670 billion parameter model, more or less at home in a prosumer setup, for around $6,000 to $7,000. Now, that sounds like a lot, right? But I mean, we have to go back to the time where, 20, 30 years ago, computers cost that much and did a trillionth of what. I mean, it's incredible that for essentially what is a very nominal price. I mean, $6,000 is a lot of money, but when you think about the fact it would have been a $200,000 Nvidia based machine, to kind of more or less configure everything. I mean, that's a huge step toward the accessibility factor of it.
Oh yeah.
Becoming
Well, yeah, even just the mere fact you can afford to buy more of the smaller setups to run the more efficient models, right? I mean, that means you can get more people on for a cheaper price because, I mean, like it or not, when servers cost more, then yeah, OpenAI is going to charge more for their, $200 a month subscription that they lose money on, right? I mean, no, I mean, of course, when they have servers and chips that are overpriced. I mean, it's really, I mean, Nvidia is not in a good position right now because I think the industry is waking up to the fact that, hey, maybe this hardware, we don't need as much of it as we thought we did, and I think that's kind of a smart idea. Also, I mean, I think it's worth noting too in having this discussion. Are you guys concerned about, I mean, are you concerned about DeepSeek being free? Like, are they taking our data? And I know, okay, I know we talk about this a lot with privacy and data and all this stuff, but like, I mean, it does cost them something, right? When people use it. So like, I mean, they're probably and they're not charging for it. So like, are they losing money when millions of people now, of course, this week, this month have been using it? Or are they, because it's so efficient, are they just, we're fine? Do you know what I mean? Like, does that concern you? The fact that it's free?
No, I mean it's a very valid critique, and it's something really that if you look at kind of what um, what they do collect. I mean, they do. I mean, they do collect your information. I mean, it's just sort of with as with every online service, right? I mean, the data has some value to it. Um, I mean, the data is, you know, exported to China. Um, not a conspiracy. I'm looking at their privacy policy right now.
Well, I'm not saying every product has to be paid. Like, but I think we are, especially in America, right? We're conditioned a little bit to think, and the classic saying, right? Like, you get what you pay for. Oh, if it's free, you're the product. I don't know. Jorge, do
Well, you're right.
you are
Yeah.
you at all about?
I think it's just a different mindset that we have here in the U.S. We need to pay for nothing is free here. Basically, you go out, you need to spend a buck, right? But there's other vision from this company of what I've been looking at. There's plenty reasons or plenty reasons why this company is free, right? It's offering that this free services. One of it can be it might be receiving government and research grants. There's the we know DeepSeek is based in China, right? Could receive a funding from the Chinese government to advance its AI capabilities, but we know there's a lot of opportunity when you are doing something great. So the reason why that they're not charging this much for a service that I don't know, I think it should be free for everyone, and it is. It's just a different mindset that they are trying to share, but my opinion, I think Nvidia or other companies like ChatGPT should start doing the same. It can't, like, things are not going to get any cheaper, but we can make a difference. And I think this is a really good call for the main companies that are charging $20, like we discussed at the beginning, to just maybe change their prices or make it more affordable. ChatGPT is not even offering a free trial. You want it, you need to pay for it. But yeah, there are many many ways how this new Chinese um, company can get plenty revenue and resources from from the government and other institutions, right? I was reading in the morning. I think they are going to start offering AI. Um, they're gonna start offering AI classes for big companies and how to implement um, their products. But that's a really good question. I think there has to be a change on mindset on how much should we be paying for these resources now, especially because they are becoming essential for plenty Americans and plenty people around the globe, right?
Yeah, AI is already taken. I mean, it's useful for so many things, and it's also, I mean, it's being incorporated again through APIs and other ways into a lot of products we use. I mean, whether it's, the Apple Intelligence update that we've been talking about, kind of a way of that, or if it's, in CRM software or search engines. I mean, we've seen large language models really being kind of injected into different areas, and I think we're being conditioned to kind of use it and expect to use it. And I don't think that's a
Well,
bad thing, but yeah, we should
and
be.
I do
Yeah.
want to say an interesting point Jorge brought up is, I mean, there is a very real possibility that, this, I mean, it could be something that's subsidized at the end of the day. If the cost is, if the cost is low enough, I mean, it could be something that, is just something that's directly subsidized, at least for the time being, to generate data.
Yeah.
Because if this is something that's a data play, um, it's it could be very, the most expensive part of really this whole operation is, gaining human data, um, from real people. So the quickest way to do that is to, have a viral release and basically just have people start feeding it data, from, from what they're doing. I mean, so it's a very, like, I think it's calculated. I don't think it will be free forever. I mean, it obviously costs something to run. um, I think at this point it's more so, we got the cost down low enough to sort of say, hey, like, at what cost would we have something that we could just subsidize for, for use, that, would, um, essentially, it's a relatively cheap way to get data.
Of course,
That,
of course.
so that's a good point to bring up, I think.
Yes. One thing that I wanted to mention is, let's say I'm like I mentioned, I'm not a professional on technologies, but if I was someone who is completely lost um, on this new update, or I don't really know what the AI is, I think we should talk about the basic points of what this is, right? Why is this important, and why are we talking about this? What is DeepSeek R1, right? Well, it is a powerful A model developed by the Chinese startup DeepSeek. This is something really important to understand, right? Not there are plenty of people out there who doesn't even know how to use IA. But why is this important? Um, it is important because it's competing with one of the elites, and not only competing but um, overstepping and doing way better than some of the models that we have right now. Imagine you have something that it's has been working for the last year, maybe 2 years, and you just release something that it's way better and more affordable. That's something um, important to look at. And also, um, well, like we discussed, there was a drop of 18% on stocks. I know there's plenty of Americans that invest um, on the 50 and the 250 most important companies in America. And that was those are some bad points, right? Um, on your stocks, but understanding that this is just a phase on the new resources that we have right now with DeepSeek. Um, it's something important to take a look at. And what would be something that you guys would share for the audience who doesn't necessarily know what the this whole movement is like one bullet point to share with people.
I mean, that's
Just
a
a
good
fish.
point. I
Yeah,
mean, like in terms of R1, I mean, it's cheap, powerful, and free, and that's what makes it so newsworthy. But also, in a sentence, I mean, it could be essentially like this next week with an entirely different model. I mean, this is just one. I mean, following this for, I mean, shoot, Jack and I have been doing this almost 2 years now. um it feels like every week. I mean, when we started, GPT 3.5 came out in late 2022, and that was sort of, not even, I mean, just over 2 years ago at this point. But it feels like every other week, there's an innovation in the space. It's hard to keep up with, even doing this part time and just researching it. But I think, from there's going to be a lot more powerful, cheap, powerful, and free coming up. And I think that's one thing for people to just, be at least a little cognizant of where this is headed. Um, and stay up with the news. I mean, like, if you hear about DeepSeek, give it a look, try it out. It's free to use on the website. You don't even need to be technically inclined. Have a list of things you'd like to ask your AI. Different prompts. And you can honestly, over time, if I ask the AI, have a similar prompt or a similar question, you really can see the growth and development of these models based on the output. So just stay vigilant and don't, and stay up with it. I mean, tech news is probably maybe, one of the, one of the, maybe least, I don't know if there's a least the most depressing, but it's a very, hopefully somewhat optimistic, of all of them. So just stay up with it as best you can. And don't be caught flat-footed. Try and incorporate it. Things are evolving so rapidly that it's kind of one of those things where if we're not we're not up to date with it, it could come to bite you.
Absolutely, yes. And going back to the basic information, I feel like I hear the word open source and closed source a lot here. I wanted to explain a little of what open source means, right? What's open source for people out there? Oh, we can imagine an open source of like when you're having you're cooking your favorite dish and you have your recipe, you gotta make it public so people can improve it or can modify it and can make it better. So it's a really good simple way to share what an AI open source means. What do you guys think? Would you guys change the recipe to try something else?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I feel like people weren't. I mean, AI is still evolving. It's always, changing. But it. I think people are going to interact in the future with technology differently than they do now. And I don't just mean searching on Google. I mean, I think you'll be able, whether it's like a more accurate voice assistant, which I think we're greatly in need of. I think Siri and Google have traditionally not been the best at automating the smart home and things of that nature, but also how we get information. It is easier to ask if you want a quick answer for something. I think more and more people are going to start trusting AI to accurately answer that question, the question that you're trying to search for, rather than you browsing the internet for random sources online. And I think so it is interesting because of course websites are still going to provide value, and it's not like people are going to stop browsing the internet. But I think how people get that information, it might not be search online and then go to the first couple web pages and read them. I think AI is going to summarize that. You're going to trust it. And whether it summarizes sources that it tells you about or whether you just trust it to give you an answer, I think that's great. And I mean, a few days ago, I was asking, again, just simple, hey, what temperature do I need to cook salmon to? What internal temperature? I mean, and that's a great question for AI that I trust the answer to, versus it would probably take me 5 times longer to open my phone, search, click on a couple pages, get through whatever ads and wait for the site to load, scroll, try to find my answer. So I think AI is just simplifying our tech lives and just making things more efficient and faster to do things. That's what I think.
Well, and Jorge, your recipe analogy was a great one. I think a great way to visualize it is you can buy a pre-made cake that tastes pretty good. The final product is visible to you. Perhaps you can reverse engineer components of it, but there's no guarantee that you'll ever find the original recipe. Whereas, at least open source, it's not a silver bullet. I mean, there's still very much technical risks to just because the code is open doesn't mean it's safe or implied secure, or it simply means that there's just more eyes on it. And between all of them, hopefully they're able to provide an insight or catch a security flaw, or one of the many benefits of open source. And honestly, I think it is a little bit more difficult to do that with a proprietary piece of software anyway. So even though if it is a weakness of, well, there's a lot of eyes, good and bad, on it, and that almost borders on, philosophically, most people are good. So, in theory, most experts that do see something would say something. But I think the recipe is kind of a great analogy to, do you have the recipe in front of you? Yes, open source. If not, and you consume the finished product, and there's still a chance to reverse engineer something, that would be more of a proprietary, ironically kind of OpenAI's model, where you have a few artifacts. I mean, there are model cards, which, again, kind of outline the performance of each model in detail. But there's not really necessarily a full breakdown of, here's how we created it and what sort of innovations we were able to include in it. More so just kind of a thorough evaluation of its performance from the company. And that's kind of the closest you're really going to get to OpenAI in that regard.
Yes, those pretty good thoughts, right? Also, something really important that people might not understand is like, well, if we talk about Nvidia as like one of the biggest makers for this chips that where ChatGPT is being run, how is Nvidia involved in all this, and what did it drop billions of dollars after DeepSeek release, right? We need to understand that AI is a powerful tool and it requires a lot of juice, requires a lot of power. So Nvidia is the biggest maker of those chips. But with the DeepSeek AI doesn't need as many Nvidia's expensive chips because it's designed to be efficient, right? This will obviously scare a lot of investors, and Nvidia's stock's price dropped by billions of dollars after DeepSeek was released. So having something better for with a more affordable price that doesn't really necessarily need a powerful chip or a powerful hardware is a bliss nowadays, isn't it, guys?
Say
Well, no, I mean, fundamentally, that's right. I mean, one of the big innovations with DeepSeek, was, they essentially, with their model, right, kind of taking things back a second, having the, multiple experts that are activated individually instead of the entire model activated at one time. It allowed them to, from a communication standpoint between the GPUs themselves, dedicate less, essentially less logic to, each one of those. So having sort of smaller clusters, um, so instead of all of the nodes having to communicate, at most, 4 nodes would communicate, which would basically reduce the amount of InfiniBand, which is kind of the communication protocol, traffic. They're able to essentially really reduce the amount of processing units dedicated to communicating across the entire thing. So that's kind of a huge efficiency savings and kind of one of the big, underlying innovations. And that's kind of what's rocked Nvidia to the core, where it's like, well, if we can efficiently use our existing hardware, there's not a need for essentially these flagship chips that are kind of Nvidia's bread and butter. So it's, essentially by lowering the cost of the communication, it's, they're essentially able to, through code optimization, have a much leaner, communication overhead for those. And that's kind of what's really spooked, at least at a technical level, what's kind of spooked investors. We can't pretend the market is rational in any way, right? But it is something that is, essentially allowing them to use previous generation hardware without too much of a, too much of a
there's not a challenge, right? Like their models are efficient enough to run on older technology. However, I don't think it's totally doomsday personally for Nvidia because yes, people should wake up and realize that efficiency is important. You can't just buy the best chips and, not worry about, the usage, the memory usage and just the power that it's consuming. So I think more efficient models are great, like DeepSeek is doing. However, you could support more users clearly, if I'm not mistaken, on a on a on a chip that's more powerful. So I mean, I don't think it's a negative to have more powerful chips, right? Like I think it's just it can support more usage, right? I mean, I that's how I look at it. Maybe do you think that that argument is not accurate? Does that make sense? Like, I
no.
think
I mean,
on
that,
a less efficient, yeah, you can run the model, but I think on a more efficient chip, you can run that model more times for more users. So it's kind of like a quality versus quantity sort of argument, kind of.
No, absolutely. I completely understand that, and that's a really good way to put things on the table, right? Um, and I agree. We are seeking for innovation, but also thinking on small startups who don't really have this amount of technology, right? It's going to be a great opportunity for them to provide maybe to build the model with the not the, a super innovative hardware and provide really good customer service for um, their customers, right? I feel like the important thing here to understand is that it's giving the option to small startups, small companies, or freelancers to experiment with these tools without necessarily invest that much on hardware.
Yeah. Yeah, good point as well.
no, and that's kind of the bottom line for all of this kind of both power and cost innovation. As cost lowers, I mean, you are able to, essentially have um, you're essentially broadening your use case. I mean, a lot more uses, essentially become more, more feasible when it comes to, what use cases or business cases can be applied. It's if you have a use case that only makes sense if the initial cost is $1,000, as soon as that threshold's breached, that use case is open to disruption. And honestly, that's kind of the I think perhaps a lot of the traditional development focus has been let's have something that performs at the cutting edge at essentially all costs, versus, hey, like, let's make something a little bit more efficient, by running it with what we have to perhaps have an equal performance without the essentially overhead. And I think that's a different approach, but also something that is desperately needed. um is innovation doesn't just occur on a single plane of AI performance. There's also the cost to performance ratio. I mean, there's at least two variables to that. And I think, at least in the early days, we've really gotten caught up of, at least, Sam Altman, is just sort of, performance at all costs. just sort of, hey, I need $50 billion. It's sort of like, okay, it's like, yep, AI is expensive. It just, he needs that money. There's really no questioning to it. It's just sort of, kind of a blank check type scenario. And I think that is going to really, kind of disrupt the paradigm of like, hey, we are going to, perhaps no longer is the era of blank check AI optimism. And now it's just sort of, it's, essentially, maybe that paradigm is shifting, honestly, in that way. Is let's focus more on efficiency now, as opposed to raw performance. And from a hardware standpoint, that's what we saw as far as the Macs transitioning to ARM. It's something that previously it's like they kept Intel despite the costs. And now it's they made that transition for kind of a similar reason, is that, well, it just so happened to be more performant and more efficient. But I think the key for them too, was the efficiency. It could have been 90% as performant, but if it used 10% of the power, Apple would have still gone for it, essentially. So kind of that same paradigm that occurred in hardware maybe 5 years ago is being applied to the software aspect now too.
Absolutely. Yeah, lots of efficiency improvements, of course, and I think OpenAI is going to be seriously retweaking, and so Anthropic, all of the companies they need, I mean, to stay relevant at this point, they've been one-upped in every way. So they're going to need to justify some of that investment back if they want to see capital to continue. Otherwise, honestly, it's going to kind of keep spiraling down. I mean, I don't see how it gets better anytime soon. I mean, I hate to say that. I really don't. I don't see how it can get better after such a slap in the face. Like, oh, you think you need $5 billion a year and 3 years to train a model? Well, we did it with $5 million and a couple months to train a model, And so I think, yeah, it's a big reckoning, and it's really going to be fascinating to see what happens in the coming months.
Absolutely. I mean, you'll have to stay tuned for that and more. Who knows? Next week, I mean, we could have an R2. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it really is quite a interesting time for AI development. We sort of talked about the the raft of new investment and kind of repealing of rules last week. We have a really breakthrough model this week, and who knows what's going to happen next week, honestly.
Well, yeah, last week we did not think we were going to be talking about this week. I don't think so. Yeah, absolutely. It's always a lot going on. Well, stay tuned. Tech Talk Live. We're back every Tuesday, same time, same place, wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, stay updated on our website, techtalklive.xyz. Sign up for our mailing list. And yeah, stay tuned to the podcast every Tuesday. Yeah.
We'll be back same time next week, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. Thank you. Or 6 p.m. Pacific. Oh, man. If it's 6 p.m. Central, we are going to... Can you imagine if California?
No, we're both not going to know what time it is.
Oh, man. Well, daylight savings is really going to throw me off.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for joining us.
And special thanks to our guest, Jorge, tonight.
Oh, thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure, okay?